Hello, I'm Michael Memis, and I'm joined by Samantha Little. She is the Director of Athletics and Wellness for Ithaca City School District. Samantha, how are you doing?
Doing well, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing all right,
Mhm.
considering everything
Yeah.
going on. So,
Mhm.
recently, the Ithaca City School District announced they would be delaying the start of the school year. They'd be doing remote instruction until October 5th.
Mhm.
How does athletics at all fit in? How does this all affect the athletics at the Ithaca City schools?
Well, I think our first priority is always students, families, and our community safety. So how this fits in is that is a part of that. So how will athletics fold into that? That's to be determined. We did have some recent guidance from the governor that youth sports could start and that low impact sports could start. What that looks like specifically, we don't have those details yet. So as things continue to unfold, athletics is another form of a classroom, the athletic environment. We're reimagining all of our spaces at this point. So it's to be determined at this point, like many things.
Yeah, and Cuomo, he did recently announce he said some lower impact sports. He mentioned a few, but I'm assuming not all. You mentioned tennis, soccer, cross country, field hockey, swimming, but I'm assuming that's not all of them. Do you have any idea what other low impact sports that may include, such as maybe
Mhm.
golf or something like that?
Mhm. Yeah, I think golf in terms of for our fall sports, cheerleading and football and volleyball are considered higher risk or mid or higher risk sports, but there hasn't been a determination yet to say that those won't happen. Everybody at this point is allowed to go back September 21st and practice. And then from there, they're trying to determine, meaning, and when I say they, meaning the New York State Public High School Association is trying to determine how many practices students will need, how many before a contest, if there will be regional play, uh, if there will just be practices for those moderate to higher risk sports, while the other ones will actually compete in a more traditional sense.
Now, those higher impact sports you mentioned, they won't start right away. So, what is the plan for them for now? Is it just kind of be practicing until it waits it out? Is it possible at one point maybe it gets moved to another season if by the time they say it's okay, it's already maybe November or something like that? Like what's going to happen, at least from your general knowledge?
Mhm. Yeah, and I think again at looking at the safety and well-being of students and families in our community, I think probably the governor has made his blanket statement, and then from there, I think the New York State Public High School Association is going to have to make a determination. So Dr. Zayas is going to have to probably ultimately make a decision, but at this point, it's really critical, one, for students to be back in school, and two, for students to be involved in their extra and co-curricular endeavors. So even if football and volleyball and cheer can only practice, I think that's a win. It's a win-win situation. I don't want to see a situation though where we're setting up sports and saying, okay, these are the sports that will participate and these can't, because I think when we look at that just from our data, I can only speak to Ithaca High School, but traditionally students of color participate more in football and cheerleading, and even our numbers have risen in volleyball. So I don't want to create or contribute to oppressive systems that our educational system already has in place. So I am hoping that even if it's inter squad or it's regional, meaning we would play Dryden or Groton or Newfield or Trumansburg or Lansing, we'd at least have some opportunity to compete. And it wouldn't be golf, and tennis, those sports that are traditionally, more of a Eurocentric community.
Now, you mentioned some of those closer schools. Are any of the schools that those teams were scheduled to play, have they canceled at all their fall sports, or are so far all schools still moving ahead with doing fall sports?
Yes. In New York State, all schools, and I can't speak for the city because sometimes that's often different, but the New York State schools, Dryden, Trumansburg, all of those schools are still proceeding with the September 21st start date.
And you mentioned let's see if I get it right, New York State Public High School Athletic Association, and I saw on the website there had some guidelines, they had a roadmap. So what precautions are the schools and the athletics team taking in accordance with these guidelines, as well as maybe additionally something that's maybe not outlined in there?
Mhm. Yeah, I think we are looking at, things like even for our officials using handheld whistles versus the ones that you blow. We're looking at, we've gotten megaphones for our coaches so we can adhere to at least the 6 foot, looking at potentially the 12 foot. We're looking at, tryouts, depending on our numbers, what that will look like, and having more than one session for tryouts. So only bringing a certain number of students in at one time. Same thing for practices. We didn't talk about girls swim and dive. That's also a fall sport. If we and pools have been open for a while, at least that the state allowed that. So that would be a situation. Our team is phenomenal, has an amazing track record. Our girls swim and dive and boys swim and dive. So we're looking at how we might bring in a group, earlier in the day and then later in the day. So there's lots of different considerations. We're taking, of course, all of the guidelines into play, even with our weight room. We've set up a virtual weight room, and we're looking at outdoor space as much as possible. But we're taking those guidelines and then also making it work for our, that are specific to our community, making things work. So signage, masks for coaches, and uh, things of that nature.
Now, a lot of professional sports, they've had testing daily or at least a couple times weekly. Are these athletes going to get tested by the school? Or are they going to have to do it on their own? If they test positive, is there going to be a contact tracing system in place? Because that could, obviously lead to an outbreak. So what's going to happen with all that?
Yeah, we'll use the same process that'll be used within the district. So at this point, we're not necessarily doing testing. We are asking families, had we gone in person, starting the 9th of September, to do the temperature at home and check with their student. And then if there is a situation where somebody tests positive, that would be then turned over to the health department, and they would kind of intercede and tell us what steps we need to take. But all of the reminders, and we do have a current initiative going on in the district about wear a mask and why it's important to wear a mask, and we're asking students to submit to a portal, and then we're going to project those and play those and get students' perspectives on all of this, and really looking for that student voice on ways that will engage them with our current reality.
Understood. And this is all right. I'm looking on this Galaxy Quest schedule, and it says the games are going to start like next week, and that's obviously not happening. Right. So now that they maybe shortened schedules, is it going to be this just games canceled, or is it going to try to be where you condense more games in a shorter amount of time? I know athletes rest is an important thing, but it's a very abnormal situation we're living in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, that guidance will come from the state, how many contests were permitted. We have that in the typical realm of things, but that's all going to change given our current state. So also we tend to play out of section, like we'll play section 1 and section 3, and we do a lot of travel. I don't foresee that happening at this time. Maybe once we hit the winter and spring season, but I think for the fall, just taking, being more precautious initially, so we can fully resume what we're used to as we proceed.
And maybe I believe I read this, that it's going to be an option for students if they want to go online or they want to be in person once October 5th happens. So for any athletes who decide they don't want to take the risk, they'd rather do online, what avenues are there for them to stay involved with the teams, or stay involved, or start maybe try to be involved with a new team? What are the options there?
Yeah. Our goal is for full student participation, if that is what they choose. What that will look like will be determined on how things progress. Transportation is a big issue, so students that choose virtual, and then to get to campus, once we hit October 5th, there's all of those different pieces of the puzzle. So I think we're just going to have to play things as they go along, and kind of do our best to support students in meeting each of their aspirations, but also the safety piece. I don't know what it looked like. It might be a situation where we say, if you're, you are considered, that is something that the state did talk about. You're a bona fide student, regardless if you're virtual or in person, if you have those 3 classes in PE. So I think, that makes a case for, regardless if you're virtual or not, you should still be able to come on campus and participate. But we'll have to play all of that by ear, so to speak.
Now, I also read that there was a possibility of a condensed season schedule if fall sports are up, seasons are interrupted or impacted by the COVID-19 crisis. Are you guys prepared for that? If that ends up happening, where you're going to have to play three sports seasons in the span of basically, it was like January to June or something like that.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, at this point, we're prepared for anything because, like I said, we just want students in school and we want them participating. What that would look like, uh, again, we don't know. Is that what's best for students? Only families and students can determine that. But to play two sports in one season, I think that's a bit much. However, we will, again, work with students and families and collect some data and see what they're thinking. It's also a hardship for coaches. We have some coaches that are three sport coaches, so they're going to blend into seasons. So there's a lot of that still to be determined, but we are prepared. And our conference, as a rule, has that you can only participate in one sport at a time. But we, as a conference, if all of the ads or directors decide that's something that we want to forego, then that's something we can vote on and waive, so students can participate in more than one sport in a given season.
Now, I think more focusing on the high school, but there are also modified sports in middle school. So how is that all be affected by this? Is it similar to the high schools? Is there anything different because there are also two middle schools as opposed to one high school?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and right now I will say the state's talk has only been about JV and varsity. I don't know what it looks like for modified. We're also planning and preparing for that because I feel it's highly unlikely that there'll be a modified season. So we're looking at intramurals and other ways for those 7th and 8th graders to be involved and to kind of continue that feeder system, so to speak, that we so gravely need in trying to produce the best student athletes we can.
Now, I don't know if is the case with the Ithaca City School District, but I know with my school district growing up in 8th grade, you could possibly try to play for the high school team. I don't know exact process for that, but are maybe more 8th graders can be allowed to play on the JV team or be part of it because of the fact that maybe no modified this year?
Yeah, so 7th and 8th graders, there is the athletic placement process, and that is for exceptional student athletes. So student athletes who are going to play at least 50% of the time and potentially even start. So I feel like we have to, while these are unprecedented times, we also have to keep some integrity to processes that we have in place. Because there's a variety of factors there, from physical maturity to intellectual, emotional maturity. So we will follow that process at this point. It's usually a coach or a PE teacher has to recommend a student athlete to play up. Yeah, because I think that process has been misused in typical times, let alone try to divert from what the true sanctity of that process is. So yeah, we'll see.
Mm-hmm. Now, expectations are going to be a little bit different this year. Obviously, you want to succeed, but it's going to be very different. So, what would you consider a successful 2020 to 2021 athletic year for Ithaca High School, and I guess the two middle schools as well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do think success is defined on many levels. I think each year we're looking at success from not about wins and losses. It's about the growth and development of the student athlete from the start of the season to the end of the season. And that is not just on the playing field or in the pool or on the court. So to me this year, if we can just get through 3 seasons and participate and actually play competition outside of, inter squad, that would be a huge success. And then supporting the students in the virtual or the in-person classroom to do their best academically in that traditional academic environment. But those would be awesome.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you. Take good care.
Will do. For ICTV Sports and WICB Sports, I'm Michael Memis.